so happy to have this opportunity to speak with Andrew McGonigle. Andrew, how are you doing today? How's your day been so far?
Doing great. Thank you so much. Yeah, really lovely to meet you. Yeah, everything's good. I'm in LA, just came back from a trip to the UK. So a little bit jet lagged, but I'm not actually a morning person. So right now I'm up like super early and it's really nice
Yeah.
to feel smug like other people do when they're up really early. And
Yes.
get loads done before people are getting out of bed. It's great.
That's I hear you, man. I hear you. What were you doing you said you're in England?
Yeah, it was in England and Ireland. Yeah, so a mixture of teaching workshops to yoga teachers and also visiting friends and family. So, I'm from Northern Ireland originally. I lived in London for 10 years before moving to LA. So, have a lot of people to connect with there. Yeah, so it was great. Very busy trip. But glad to be back in LA, which is home for me now. So yeah, back to the sunshine.
Very cool. Yeah, I bet I heard that the winter season has been a little rough. I have friends that have family in Amsterdam, and they said it has been raining and cool for like months, like raining for months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like honestly, like the gray skies were the thing for me. I was like, oh, I love London. Like I had a great experience there. I was definitely ready to move on after 10 years. Being back and experiencing like gray weather for like 3 weeks, I was like, yeah, I'm not meant to be here.
Yeah.
It's like, get me back to California ASAP, please.
Yeah, man. I hear you. It is beautiful out there for sure. And can you tell me what your background, your educational background is?
Yeah, yeah. So originally, I trained as a medical doctor. So I went to medical school and then worked briefly as a doctor. Any of the listeners in Europe will recognize that things are done slightly differently there. So I went to medical school at age 18, which, normally in America, you go to pre-med and then you go to medical school. So I was super young. Honestly, I didn't have the emotional intelligence at the time to deal with like the level of stress and kind of expectation. So after a brief period working as a doctor, I was like, peace out. I'm done.
Yeah.
But also what was beautiful is I'm very grateful for this is I was young, but also I didn't have student debt because at the time, pretty much medical school was free for me in the UK, which is pretty amazing, isn't it? I know
Amazing.
that people here that graduate medical school in America come out with, up to like $1 million in debt, I think, some cases. So I was very fortunate that I was young and didn't have debt. So I then had the freedom to go, wow, what an incredible experience, but it's not for me. So I'm going to pivot and figure out what I want to do with my life. Now, at the time, I had no idea what that was, but I ended up working in fashion. So I moved to Australia and I ended up working for a really cool British fashion designer called Paul Smith. And I ended up pretty much like running their business for them in Australia, New Zealand after a few
Wow.
years. But in the meantime, I was really getting into yoga. So I started meditating as a final year medical student. Now, I was tired all the time. And a friend said to me, oh, you should try this thing called meditation. Now, obviously, 2024, everyone knows, or is everyone's familiar with the idea of meditation. Rewind to 2004, it was something I'd heard of. It felt a bit kind of woo-woo. And I was like, oh yeah, I've heard of this thing, this meditation thing. Okay, great. I'm going to give it a go. And it was a life-changing experience. I did this transcendental meditation course. It was so profound the way it immediately affected me. And it became this daily ritual, that I really did religiously for a long, long time. And then that was the gateway into yoga. So in Sydney, in Australia, I was walking to my job every day and I walked past this really lovely yoga studio, it kept catching my eye. I ended up becoming a regular practitioner. And then after a few years of very regular practice, I just had this kind of epiphany one day after class. I was like, okay, I can see myself like in the teacher role. Um, Doing this. And that was it. And I ended up training to become a teacher, gave up my job in fashion. Everyone thought I was crazy. They had just got their head around me not being a doctor. They're like, okay, he's settled. He's got this good kind of corporate job. I quit that. People are like, oh my God, I can't pigeonhole him. And then started working as a yoga teacher in London, moved to London. And then I also did a massage training alongside it. I've always loved massage. And I went back to assist on the course where I trained to become a massage therapist. And one of the students knew about my background and they said to me, have you ever thought about teaching anatomy? No, I had literally never, ever thought about it. The thought had never crossed my mind. And I suddenly was like, oh, wow, yes, this is what I need to do. So I literally pivoted again, and I've now been teaching anatomy pretty much full time for approaching 10 years,
Wow.
teaching either yoga teacher trainees or yoga teachers. So it's been this really beautiful journey. I feel super blessed. Like I've become so passionate about anatomy through the lens of wellness and movement. Because when I was studying anatomy at medical school, it was all through the lens of disease and it just felt very dry and I couldn't really relate it to kind of my everyday life. So it's been really beautiful having this like full circle moment and now looking at anatomy like in a completely different perspective. It's been really amazing, you know?
That's so cool, Andrew. What a great, like you said, full circle. And to be able to become a medical doctor, then to traverse the fashion industry, fall in love with meditation, practice yoga, become a yoga teacher, and then have your anatomy background, which you obviously did pretty extensive study to get
Yeah.
through medical school, I'm gathering.
Yeah.
And to have it all fall into place like that, that's really cool.
It's
I
it was
enjoy
really
hearing.
beautiful. I think at the
Yeah.
time, like as I was making those steps, I didn't really couldn't see the bigger picture, obviously, like so part of me when I was in fashion was like, oh God, I kind of feel like I've wasted my degree, in a way. But
Yeah.
what is beautiful now to reflect on is I essentially learned how to run a small business. So
Mm.
I now apply that to my business as a yoga teacher and anatomy teacher. So it's like every element has helped me to become this kind of rounded individual. And yeah, it's been really exciting to kind of look back and recognize, oh, this is why I made that choice. Like it makes sense now, even though it probably didn't make sense, 15 years ago. But yeah, it's really special.
What about pre-med when you were say 15, 16, was going to become a doctor something your parents said, Andrew, the only way you're going to make money is if you either be a doctor or a lawyer, or was it that you had this fascination with either the body or science or the medical
Yeah,
profession? How did that come about?
that's a lovely question. Thank you. Yeah, I loved science. I was a big science nerd, and I also loved people. I loved working with people. I ended up at in like high school, basically setting up like an informal homework club for younger students after school. That was just my nature. I just always loved teaching people and being with people. So it made sense to me at the time to combine this love for people and this love for
Mm.
science. Now, also what really helped is my sister was at med school. She was 3 years ahead of me. And my parents didn't put the pressure on, but we both went to a very, very academic school where there were the expectations that if you were kind of this like what we say in the UK is like a straight A student, when you get A's and everything. I don't know if that's how that translates in America.
Yeah, it does.
Um,
Same thing.
yeah, you don't
Yeah.
understand what I mean. Great.
Yes.
So there was like this idea of actually, if you're getting these grades, go do become a lawyer or become a dentist or become an architect or become a doctor. And I didn't allow myself to look at any other options. So
Yeah.
then, but when I got to medical school, I was like, oh wow, like I've made such an uninformed choice because really 18, like or at 15, 16 when you're making those decisions, and then 18 when I was there, I was like, I had no idea what this was going to be
Yeah.
about. And then also it's really fascinating. We were literally thrown in the deep end. Week one of med school, we had to do dissection on cadavers.
Wow.
No one pulled us aside and said, look, for some of you, this is going to be the first time you see a dead body. Now, in Ireland, growing up with Catholicism, I'd seen lots of open caskets. So I had, unfortunately, when family members or, friends of or family died, I would go and see a dead body. But, for a lot of people, that was their first experience. But there was kind of no emotional support, or we weren't kind of pulled aside afterwards and we are like, let's talk about this. Like, what
Mm.
was it like?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
a
Good point.
scalpel on a body for the first
Yeah.
time or anything. So basically, it was just kind of this wild ride, and you had to kind of go with it. And it was also like there wasn't direct competition between me and my other students, but I remember a girl fainting in the first dissection class, and we kind of all were like, oh, she's probably not going to last, and she dropped out like a few months in. So there was just this kind of weird thing where you had
Yeah.
to like hold it all in, get on with it, deal with all this stress, all these new things, these emotional things. And I think as an emotional person, I just did not feel supported. And I imagine things have changed quite drastically over the last 20 years. But for me at that time, I was just like, whoa, like I don't know if I'm ready for this.
That's so fascinating. Oh my gosh. I can, the way you painted that picture, I can, that was a good job. I can see it.
Thank you.
Did
We're all kids, all kids trying to deal with this. It was kind of amazing.
Yeah. I love anatomy, and I took my first anatomy course. I went to massage therapy school here in Florida, and over the years I've gotten more and more enamored with it, and recently got a chance to go watch a speech by a man named Gil Headley. Have you?
Yes, heard
And
of Gilly. Yeah, really
he
amazing.
he's a big time cadaver research person, and he dissected the entire nervous system out of cadaver, and took photos and video and showed the entire journey from start to finish, and it just blew my mind. I mean, I would love that opportunity, but that this is after like 25 years of slowly getting
Yeah,
acclimated to this idea of being fascinated by doing that type of work. So I can imagine at 18, like, oh, I'll go to medical school, and then bam, you're right in
yeah.
there doing a cadaver dissection. That would be eye-opening. What realizations did you have then in relation to the human body and the experience of actually going into the body and seeing it?
I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't know that there were many realizations because it was just overwhelmed. And I think the education that I had prior to that, it didn't invite you to question things. So it just invited you just to take things as fact and write it down. So there was a lot of just like memorizing everything,
Mm,
and there wasn't a lot of like really thinking about how does this like apply to everything. And so
yeah.
it was quite a weird abstract experience, if I'm really honest with you. And I think, but what I'm grateful for is it gave me this really, really solid foundation in anatomy, in anatomical language, in medical terminology, and even like dissecting a medical paper, a research paper. So it's like I see almost like med school has given me this really, really firm foundation. And then I had to go off and now look at things in a completely different perspective
Yeah.
as someone who was interested in well-being and movement. So that was the thing. It was really, I'm so grateful for that experience, but um
Well
it was
said.
like a
It,
deer in headlights just trying to like get through it. you know
that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. If I'm your so you offer anatomy training for yoga
yeah,
teachers, yoga students, and you have online programs, and you also help yoga teacher trainers utilize your coursework to be able to teach such a deep and sometimes difficult subjects such as
yeah,
anatomy, um,
yeah,
which is pretty cool because I mean it's trying to relate a subject that like you got thrown into the deep end, to relate that type of study to a new student who's just perhaps just starting to even memorize like the name of a bone, like
yeah.
or the name of a muscle. Where do you start with the absolute beginner mind? Where do you even
Yeah.
begin in relation to starting to teach anatomy in relation to a yoga training?
Yeah, no, that's a really good thing. I think, and also I love that description you made because it makes me realize why I'm quite good at breaking stuff down and making stuff really relevant because I've had to do that myself in a different context. So thank you for that. That's kind of I've never thought about it in that way. For me, like I love to start with just like discussion and also hear from people. Like one of the first questions I ask when I'm in like a group is, why do you think it's important for us to study anatomy? And then all this stuff starts coming out, and some of it's really spot on, and some of it's kind of quite outdated, but it's really interesting to kind of get a sense of like where people are coming from. And then what I love to do is I love to basically I do basically like a session. It's called intelligent movement principles. And we do that by slowly starting to understand like muscle. Like what is muscle? What's it about? Why do we have it? How does it behave? What are the misconceptions we often have about it? And then we kind of understand that because so much of our physical asana practice is using our skeletal muscle. And then we do a similar thing with bone. And we're like, what is bone? Like, why do we have it? What's it made up of? How does it behave? What are the misconceptions about it? So it's like breaking that down, then doing a similar thing with like connective tissue, with fascia, with all that. And then we like wrap it all up. So it's kind of like a little bit like the medical model, which is to like break things down into components, but then it's always reminding people that we're one entity. So we're not, we're breaking things down to understand them, but then we're always going to add the pieces back together because nothing works in isolation. So yeah, it's really cool actually. And what I find is that it's easier to take people on a journey where they have very little knowledge because they're not coming in with all these like preconceived ideas. It's the person that's maybe studied anatomy quite a lot that comes in like very fixated on their beliefs. That can be a harder nut to crack because I'm like release that. If you can let a lot of your preconceived ideas leave them at the door, you can collect some of them back up again afterwards, but then you're more likely to learn. So actually, I love teaching people where they feel like they have very little knowledge, but we often also have more knowledge than we realize, don't we? Because we've
Mm.
all experienced some sort of injury, or maybe our close friend or family member has a certain medical condition, and then we kind of end up gleaning all this information about certain layers of the body or certain parts of the body. So I enjoy allowing people to realize that they often know more about the body than they think as well, you
Nice.
know?
Yeah. To
Yeah,
kind
so
of
it's
break.
fun. It's a really fun journey I really enjoy. And then once we've got that foundation, then we go on a journey like through the body, let's start at the feet. Let's move our feet. Let's palpate our feet. Let's relate this to yoga. Let's look at the ankle movements. Where do these appear in the asanas? So it all feels like very, very relevant to what we're doing. And I think that's something that's a real focus of mine. Like, how do we relate this all as much as possible? So honestly, like I'm not going to teach much about the nerves or even the blood vessels because it's very hard to relate that directly to the practice. But when we're looking at the joints and the muscles, yeah, that can now make sense when we break down Trikonasana in a group and look at it, that way. So for me, it has to really be able to be related. Otherwise, I try not to go into too much detail because it just becomes completely overwhelming for people.
Agreed 100%. You said that one of the ways that you will frame one of the original questions when you meet up with the group is you'll ask, why do you think it's important to study anatomy as a yoga practitioner and teacher? If I ask you that question, why do you, Andrew, think that it's important to study anatomy if you're a yoga teacher and or practitioner?
Yeah, I think this amazing human body is our vehicle, hopefully for quite some years to come. We're traveling around the world in this body. So it's like when we learn anatomy to kind of sufficient detail, we end up in awe of our body. And then we respect our body more and we want to work with our body rather than against it. We want to age well, and we want to take care of this vehicle. Um, and then also as a teacher, what's beautiful is when you learn anatomy to a certain kind of level of detail, it gives you a confidence to say less. It gives you a confidence to not complicate things and to not justify things. Often happens in a way people will justify a cue and they'll go down a rabbit hole that's very incorrect and also can be harmful.
Mm,
So for example, a cue like in a warrior pose, keep your knee above your ankle. That's great. Like that's very traditional alignment, and there's definitely it definitely makes sense to do that in many cases. But if you then go on a step further and say we're going to keep our knee above our ankle to protect our knee joint, that's actually incorrect in the vast majority of cases, and it's harmful because that language, even though it can feel um, not so powerful, can end up creating this narrative that parts of the body like the knee are fragile and that
mm,
we always need to be aware of what we're doing. Now, of course, I always encourage people to make very intentional movements in yoga, really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. But um, I think that when you learn anatomy in a certain way to a certain level of detail, you realize how resilient and robust the body is. And that informs your own practice, but it also informs how you kind of hold space for other people. And I think that's the most powerful thing for me. It's like this weekend, I said I was just in England teaching this weekend, and the feedback was beautiful. And it's never, oh, I loved suddenly being able to remember all the muscles in the lower leg. Like that's not particularly helpful. That's not really going to make you a better teacher, but it's the light bulb moments of someone going, oh wow, like um I've suddenly become more clear on my relationship with my lower back pain. And it's going to not only help me to feel better, but it's also going to totally reframe the way I talk to a student who comes to class with back pain, you know? So that's the kind of thing for me, just beautiful. Like, oh, it just makes everything worthwhile when I, get that kind of feedback. So it's like that's for me, that's what the magic is of studying the body. It's um we just realize like the resilience, how robust our bodies are, and also this amazing ability for our body to heal, in the vast majority of cases. So yeah,
Great
that's the
answer.
really floats my boat.
Yeah, I love that. You also threw out another question, and I'm curious what your answer will be to this. What is muscle? What is it?
Yeah. So it's basically it's a tissue. So it's a group of cells basically that all behave in a similar way that's essentially governed by the nervous system. And it's there, when we think of it maybe from a physical asana practice, it's there to help us to move. And often it uses our bones as levers to move, or it's also there to prevent movement or to refine movement, you know? So it's this um remarkable tissue, and it's also again never in isolation, so it's interwoven with connective tissue. Fascia, that's such a buzzword at the moment, and it's continuous with bone, so muscle becomes tendon that becomes bone. It's all interwoven. But again, in the medical model, we like to break things down, look at them separately, but then it's always about remembering to add them back up again, So it's a really cool thing. And then it's about how do we bring that alive in a workshop? Like how do we really get people to experience how their muscle behaves? And also I love to like break down misconceptions. So like one of the things is that in yoga, we often talk about muscle lengthening over time. So a lot of people will say, oh, I have chronically like short hamstrings, or sitting shortens my hip flexors, and really the latest science is telling us that that's kind of rubbish, and that muscle doesn't change length over time. It doesn't become longer or become shorter. And it's all governed by the nervous system. So there's something that we're talking about at the moment that's called stretch tolerance. So maybe how far you're folding forward in Paschimottanasana, it's actually being governed by your nervous system, and it's essentially it's sensation that ultimately limits movement in most cases. And then maybe if you're practicing very mindfully and you're moving with your breath and you're practicing regularly, your nervous system might then grant you permission to move a little further, and the muscle stretches in that moment. And then after the stretch, it'll come back to its resting state, So just things like this, just so fun exploring. And also science is always changing. So it's like I'm never fixed on a belief, but I'm like, this is what the latest science is telling us this, but the pendulum will swing. And then maybe there'll be a paper that say, oh, muscle does lengthen, but it only lengthens like by a few millimeters. Or, so it's like, it's just fascinating keeping on top of it all.
It's so fascinating. And the idea of, say, when I'll just pick, say, the Ashtanga yoga practice, and you're practicing primary series. Are you familiar? I bet
Yeah.
you've come across
Yeah.
everything, right? In the last 20
I
years,
practiced Ashtanga for
I'm sure.
years. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, for
cool.
years. Yeah.
And you're familiar, say, like, let's just pick that one little segment where you're learning the Mrichyasanas, Mrityasana
Yeah.
A, B, C, and D. And maybe the first time you go for Mrityasana A, and then for those of you listening, I can't assume that you know what I'm talking about, but like if you're say your left leg is forward, you bend your right knee up, you take your right arm, wrap it around the inside edge around the leg, and you catch your hands behind. And so
So
like you
simple,
you
isn't
go to
it?
you go to catch your hands behind, and they don't catch. And you know, maybe someone puts a strap or a towel or someone come assist and tries to pull you in. It's like there's no way. You got like about 8 inches or you know, a big old gap there. And then you keep doing it, you keep doing it, you keep doing it, and before you know it, boom, you caught your hands.
Yeah.
In your opinion, nervous system relaxation, are we learning to move from that sympathetic fight or flight struggle mode? We start
Yeah.
breathing, the parasympathetics kick in, we're in the rest and repair mode, and then the muscles themselves and the joints didn't really restructure anyway, and the muscles didn't really lengthen, but the nervous system relaxed, and that's why we caught. That sounds to me a little bit more like your explanation currently for how we
Yeah.
actually quote improve our flexibility. Like, are we do we ever really improve our flexibility? Because it does seem like if we continue working these sequences and these postures over and over again, that, oh my gosh, I'm able to do all these things I just wasn't able to do before.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts in this field?
I think it's ultimately about the nervous system feeling safe, because I think the nervous system is two-way thing. So it's information coming from the brain out to the body, but it's also information coming from the body back to the brain. So we talk about the vagus nerve a lot, and it's a big component of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest. Well, 80% of the vagus nerve is carrying information from the periphery back to the central nervous system. So when we become stronger, the nervous system feels safer. Like when we're approaching things in this like very intentional way, when we're focused on our breath, when we're working with our body rather than against it and kind of pushing or struggling, then that's what my sense is, that the nervous system's like, okay, you're working with me, so I'm going to work with you. And then over time, you get granted this kind of greater, range of movement. Pretty
Yeah.
cool. And again,
Yeah.
like this, it's not all an exact science at the moment. Like we don't have science that can back up every element of that, equation. But that's, I'm from all the reading and research I've done over the years, it's, really it's the nervous system. And that's what gives us most of the benefits that we get in yoga. Most of the benefits come from the way that we're interacting with the nervous system, you
Mm,
know?
it's
But we're still
fascinating.
not, and also it's fascinating because we're still not entirely sure like why we get all the benefits we do from yoga. Like we can't fully explain all of that. Yeah, maybe one day we will be able to, maybe we'll never be able to fully explain it, but I get a sense that it's the nervous system plays like a big, big part in that. It's pretty cool.
That's very cool. When we hear about, say, going back many, many years ago to like a old school India yoga practice, and if we were just to take a stab at, say, like 2,500 years ago, the understanding of anatomy in relation to Western anatomy obviously has evolved quite a bit. And
Yeah,
do you think, like, do you think, oh gosh, are we making strides forward because of our increase of information and knowledge? Because it seems to me like a lot of the knowledge was like there, and now
yeah,
we're able to prove it. But it kind of like in relation when I saw Gil's dissection of the nerve tree and we hear about the chakra system and we might think, oh, you can't, cut into the body and see the nadis, these energy channels that were spoken of
yeah,
in older texts. But now when we look at the nerve tree and we look where the nerve plexi are, there are nerve plexi at each of the
yeah,
chakra points. And it's almost like they already knew this. And now science is backing it up. And you made mention that maybe we will know all the answers. I wonder maybe we already do know all the answers, but we
yeah.
just, I
Yeah,
know
I
it's
think
getting a
it's
little
interesting.
philosophical, but I'm curious what you what
Yeah,
you
because
think.
I think like not everything does need to be explained, but I think what is particularly helpful, let's say when it comes to research being done, is it also tells us, yes, like this practice is safe for certain people. That's a good thing, isn't it? Because if, you know, if we're prescribing yoga to people with cardiovascular disease and all these things, like we also want to have research that tells us for that group of people this is safe. So I think it definitely adds a lot to the conversation. And I also, from my perspective, I don't think it takes away anything. I think it just adds to the conversation.
Yeah.
So I've written a couple of books. The second book I wrote is called The Physiology of Yoga, and it's basically an evidence-based look at how yoga interacts with each of the major systems of the body. And, you know, the majority of people that come across it really enjoy the book. There's always going to be a bit of pushback because some people are like, oh, I'm just so sick of this. I'm so sick of people trying to explain yoga through a scientific lens. And I get that on a personal level. I get that. But I'm never trying to take away anything. I'm just trying to add to the conversation. I'm trying to add another layer. And I don't think that has to take away any of the beauty or power
I
of
agree.
yoga,
I
you
agree.
know?
How does yoga affect the endocrine system, our hormones?
Yeah. So that's a good question. The biggest way would be through the stress response, you know. So the sympathetic. So think of the sympathetic versus parasympathetic. A big part of the sympathetic nervous system is actual nerves innervating certain parts. The other part is the nervous system interacting with the endocrine system via the pituitary gland, which is the kind of the master gland. So really, again, one of the major benefits is that yoga is pretty powerful at helping us move out of a place of kind of chronic sympathetic stimulation, you
Mm,
know? And I
yes.
think I never look at things as black and white. Like sympathetic doesn't mean bad and parasympathetic doesn't mean good. It's always a dance, but basically a regular yoga practice helps us to move more efficiently between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Like you basically want flexibility in your body, but you also want to have flexibility in your physiology. So by having a regular practice that tends to calm us down, then we become better at flicking between
Mm,
stress, states of stress and non-stress. We become more efficient at that move.
yeah,
And that's a really powerful thing to be able to do.
that's
So I
cool.
would say that's the key way.
What about in relation to immune system and lymphatics?
Yeah. So one of the biggest misconceptions, and people kind of throw around these statements, they'll say, oh, yoga boosts the immune system. Well, when you look at that from a physiological perspective, it makes no sense. And in fact, you wouldn't want to boost your immune system
Ah,
because think of your innate immune response. It's your first line defense. You're going to basically feel the symptoms of your innate immune response when you have an allergy reaction. So your nose is going to run, you're going to congest, you're probably going to tear up. So all that first line defense, it's very rapid, but kind of non-specific. So if you were to boost your immune system, you would feel unwell the whole time. You would end up with depression, all these horrible things. You don't want to do that. But actually, it's the opposite. What yoga can do is it can down regulate parts of the immune system in cases of chronic inflammation.
ah,
Because inflammation is an essential part of the immune response. You have to be able to have an inflammatory response or you would not stay alive. But what you don't want is for that to become persistent beyond when it's needed. And it's yoga that can help to downregulate that. So we're even realizing that osteoarthritis, it's not a wear and tear disorder. It's to do with systemic inflammation. It
mm,
happens to show up in certain joints. It's fascinating. So there are so many diseases that have this huge chronic inflammation component, and yoga can help us to downregulate that. So that's pretty amazing.
that's so cool. Great answer.
Thank you.
Cardiovascular. This one I would think seems maybe if someone doesn't practice yoga and you say yoga is good for your heart, how
Mm.
how do you explain or how could you
Yeah.
verify that or do you have a rebuttal?
No, this is a beautiful one because also we often talk about a heart-centered practice, and it's also beautiful to like line that up with the science. So yoga has a very powerful effect on the cardiovascular system. It can lower blood pressure over time. It can also lower your resting heart rate. And your resting heart rate is a really important parameter. It's one of the key things that physicians are now looking at to determine your overall health. So it's basically how quickly your heart is beating at rest, you know. And also, we talked about, shifting between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Well, the way that is actually measured is by something called heart rate variability. So it's the variance between your heartbeats, and you want high heart rate variability. It means that you can very quickly shift states. If you have low heart rate variability, you're very sluggish to move between states. You don't want that. So there's a suggestion that yoga can help with heart rate variability. There isn't a lot of research done on this, but there's kind of like a suggestion that it's going to help in that way as well. And it can also help reduce a lot of their risk factors for cardiovascular disease as well. So yeah, it can have a really, really powerful role. And it's also going to help venous return, so the flow of blood back to the heart. Because if you think of blood traveling from your heart to your big toe, the blood pressure takes it there. But then if you're standing a lot of the day, it's hard to get that blood back to the heart. Thankfully, a lot of the valves have, oh, sorry, a lot of the veins have one-way valves. So when blood travels up towards the heart, it can't travel back. But skeletal muscle contracting also helps to press that back. So when you have strong feet and strong ankles and strong calf muscles from all your yoga, then you're going to always be helping blood to return, back to the heart. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff there.
That's so cool. Fact or fiction? A while back ago, I heard somebody say, okay, you're lying in Shavasana. It's time to come back up to seated. Roll over onto your right side of the body because it's easier for your heart to function when you're laying on your right side due to the way the ventricles work with the heart versus if you lie or lay on your left side. That makes sense? Is that?
I think it's a
You
bit of a
ever heard
stretch. I think,
that? All
and
right, good to know.
also most
Um,
of us think about your heart for a second. Your heart starts to beat in your mother's womb, and it continues to beat hopefully till the day you die. It's so resilient. It's this incredible made of cardiac muscle that is designed for endurance. It's going to beat billions of times in your lifetime. It's very resilient part of our anatomy. I think it'll be fine if you roll over on the other side. It's not
right.
it's not spontaneously combust. Well, it might, but I can't promise anything, but I think there's a very low chance of that happening.
Amazing. And when you were talking about heart rate variability, and then when we inhale, I believe or help, please correct me if I'm wrong. When
Yeah,
we inhale, our heart rate speeds up. When we
yeah,
exhale, our heart rate slows down. So I've
yeah,
heard someone mention recently that you can definitely control your respiratory system, which is a part of our
yeah,
autonomic nervous system. Like it automatically happens. We breathe no matter what, even if we don't think about it. But you can control your breath. But if
yeah.
you try to use your thoughts, you may or may not be able to get your heart rate to slow down just with thinking alone. So
Mhm.
that if you want to control your heart, if you do longer exhalations, that then on the exhale with a longer exhalation will make your heart rate slow down. Hence, that's
Yeah,
why they recommend if you're feeling anxiety, do like that ratio of breath where it's like a 1 to 2, where you inhale for one, but you
yeah,
breathe for two. Do you believe then we do have control over our heart, even though it is an
yeah,
automatic response?
yeah. It's really beautiful because, as you say, the respiratory system is the only system in the body that has both voluntary and involuntary control. So we're not thinking about breathing here during this conversation, but we can manipulate our breath as we do in so many ways in yoga. So it's the gateway to access all the other physiology that's normally beyond our conscious control. So you can't like quickly grab a burrito on the way to yoga and then be like, come on, digestive system, get digesting because I've got a class to get to. But what you could do is you could sit and do like a breath practice that's focused, say, on the exhale, like we've talked about, and that will in turn help to like get the digestive system going. So, I would say don't eat a burrito straight for class. But yeah. And also the reason why the heart rate increases as you inhale and decreases as you exhale is because during the exhalation, the parasympathetic nervous system conspires to stiffen the airway so that they don't collapse on the exhale.
Mm,
And therefore, as a result of that, the heart rate um, slows.
very cool.
So, and then as you inhale, I believe it's the sympathetic nervous system slightly dilates the airways. So, therefore, as a result, the heart rate quickens. Yeah, it's very, very cool.
Ah, amazing. I have to ask you, my wife and I did train with Bikram Chowdhury in Los Angeles back in 2001, and it was unbelievably hot. Like he heated that room to like torture chamber style heat. Your thoughts on to heat or not to heat, external heat versus internal heat,
Yeah.
up the musculature. I recently got a chance to interview a man named Magnus Alpeberg that lives in Finland. He goes ice bathing every single day in the middle of winter when it's like freezing cold. He still goes in the water and he's like, I
Yeah.
practice yoga on the ice. He's like, you don't have to be in a hot room to do yoga. You
Yeah.
can do yoga in the ice. So I'm curious, what's true? No, I can't.
Yeah. So I think, what I love about hot yoga is it's this gateway that brings a lot of people to yoga. And I want more and more people to practice yoga. We need it. We need more and more people on this planet practicing yoga. So it's something that seems to attract people, whether it's for this idea of, oh, sweating detoxes me, which is also a load of rubbish, by the way. But that's for maybe for another conversation. But so I think so. I actually taught hot yoga in London alongside other forms of yoga, and I taught it in an infrared space. We had infrared panels on the ceiling, and it would heat the body directly instead of the air. And I loved it. Honestly, I felt great in it. I loved the fact that because of the intensity, people really had to slow down and become really intentional about what they're doing because if you push through, you'll probably pass out. So there was something about like a slower, more controlled practice that I really enjoyed. And so I'm not someone that's like, oh, hot yoga is a load of rubbish, but as for the benefits beyond that, yeah, um, it's going to basically help you to become better at regulating your temperature over time, which can be a useful thing. Um, but if hot yoga is not your thing, don't feel like you're also missing out on anything. You're not going to get a ton of extra benefits compared to any other style of yoga. And then cold cold therapy or immersing yourself in cold water and stuff. Yeah, there's definite benefits to be had. I think we still need all the science to back it all up. Um, I love a really cold shower. It makes me feel amazing. It wakes me up. If I have a headache, put my head under cold water in the shower and the headache goes normally. So there's a lot of things. I maybe don't have all the explanation for it, but yeah, I think our body just craves diversity. It craves novel challenges. But because and the thing is, if you have cold exposure every day, there might be a sense of your body becomes very used to that, and then you don't quite get the benefits you did at the start of it. So then maybe
Interesting.
that person could benefit from hot yoga, you know. So I would just say mix it up but also don't lose sleep at night going, oh, I need to create time in my week for an ice bath. You don't have to. Like if it doesn't if it's not something that resonates with you, don't worry. Like you're going to be fine. You're going to live a long, healthy life. But if that's something that really resonates with you for whatever reason, yeah, do it. And if it feels good, keep doing it.
That's cool. Great answer. Growing up in the north of Ireland, did you go swimming? I watched a series on TV recently called Bad Sisters. It takes place in Ireland, and
Obsessed with that show.
I loved it. It was so good. And
And did
there's
you know
swimming.
the young sister is Bono's daughter?
Oh, I didn't know that. The
Yeah, she's
young,
amazing. It's a great show.
oh, great show. I want to go to Ireland so bad. So, did you swim like that? They're swimming all the time. I'm like, that water has to be so freezing cold, and they're just making it look like they're just like having a great old time in the
The
water.
water is freezing cold. My nephews love being in the sea all year round.
You agree?
Um,
Yeah.
I don't like getting my hair wet, Todd.
Yeah.
It's my thing.
Fair enough.
I'm I'm
I mean, your
half
hair looks
joking.
amazing, so I can see why you don't want to get it wet.
Half joking here. No, it's not something at the time that I was. It's become something much more popular in recent years, and I think Wim Hof's probably got a lot to do with it. So, like, a lot of my mum's friends will go sea swimming every week, a couple of times a week, that kind of way.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that it's not necessarily like a cultural thing. I think maybe it was something that people did on New Year's Day
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
here, but now
Uh-huh.
it's become this thing, and it's cool because
Yeah.
it's getting people more active. It's getting people outside their comfort zone.
Yeah. That's
Bring it on.
awesome. Now you did make mention, I know this is getting a little off the anatomy and yoga subject, but you did make mention I grew up Catholic and I went to a bunch of funerals. Is this because of like Catholic Protestant fighting?
Oh, right. Oh, because of like
Like IRA and
political
the
unrest.
whole, yeah.
Oh no. So basically, so I grew up in Northern Ireland in the 80s. It was very interesting because my mum is English and my dad is Irish, and they met in England at teacher training college, and then they fell in love. And basically, my dad got offered a job in Northern Ireland at a very good school. The school I went to, my dad was one of my teachers. It was awful, but it wasn't that bad. But it was he taught me sex education though, so it's cool. That was very cringe. But so basically, they moved there in the 70s. That was literally unheard of. It would be like
To
moving
move to
to
Northern Ireland from England in the
in the
70s,
70s.
people
It
would
would
say
be
you're
like
absolutely
moving
crazy.
to Gaza right now. Like basically, well, sorry,
Wow.
I can't, they're not, it's not the same experience,
Understood.
but
Understood.
it was a war torn country. There was political unrest with terrorism. So it was, so I'm sorry, I don't think it is the same as Gaza at all, but it's a modern day equivalent, I guess. So they,
No worries. No
so
worries.
um, then I grew up with quite an unusual background because my mum had to then become Catholic because you couldn't really bring up a family in a mixed religion household. But also, she had the open-mindedness beyond being Catholic. So it was great because we were exposed to like different cultures. And then also, we went to England every summer. And the town that I grew up in, just outside Derry is a beautiful city. It's become very popular because of a Netflix show called Derry Girls, which is bloody amazing.
Somebody told me to watch that yesterday. All right.
So
All
it's so
right.
good. You'll learn a lot about the history of Ireland and of like recent history. It's really beautiful. So I was very lucky that the terrorism and everything was kind of going on around me, but I was never like directly affected by it. Yeah, there was definitely like school friends that lost family members and all that kind of stuff. But I think for various reasons, I was kind of slightly protected from that and was
Nice.
also able
Yeah.
to escape every summer for 2 months when a lot of the problems happen in the summer, and I was always able to like be removed from that. So yeah, it was an interesting thing. I think it felt normal to me because that's all I knew other than my summers away. And I think the main takeaway from it is as a younger adult, I really struggled with conflict and I really struggled with anger because I didn't have like greater role models around me that dealt with anger in a productive way.
Mm,
So I think there was a lot of time where I felt like I can't be angry because if I'm angry, it'll become like violent. So that's been an interesting thing as like an
mm.
adult to explore that and see like how growing up in a country like that has kind of influenced the way I kind of walk through the world today. It's kind of interesting.
Fascinating, Andrew. That's a great
You need to
introspection.
get to Ireland, McLaughlin. It's like you go and
I'm
find him over
definitely
there.
going. I'm definitely going, especially after I watch Dairy Girls. I know
It's
two
a
two good
beautiful
Irish shows in a
country.
row.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful country. It's not somewhere I see myself living
Yeah.
again. It's
Yep.
a really beautiful country, and we really enjoy visiting there. And it's a really special time. Beautiful culture, beautiful scenery, music. It's just very, very friendly people. Yeah, it's a really special part of the
Cool.
world for sure.
Cool. What do you think of the LA yoga scene?
So I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't really dipped into it. I moved to LA just before COVID, and I had spent a long time building up a name for myself in Europe. So I've always focused on doing kind of in-person stuff there. rather than here. Yeah, and it's also nice because I was really, really heavily involved in the yoga scene in London. And it's actually nice to come here and be anonymous and not really like be a part of the scene here, you know? So yeah, I'm gonna be honest, like I'm not really tapped into it, you know? I don't know. And in the past, I've been to places like Yoga Works and stuff, and I know that that's closed down. So it's been an interesting time for yoga in LA. A lot of places have closed, a lot of places have newly opened, but you know, just the way my life has been, I don't really feel like I'm a big part of that, and it actually serves me quite well. I get to just do my own thing at home, and
Very
yeah,
cool. How
yeah.
how do you, so I know like you flew to England and you were able to teach a workshop in person with people there. Can you
Yeah.
explain a little bit about how your online program, how you've developed it, and what
Yeah,
sort of trajectory that has taken from beginning to present day?
yeah, for sure. I'm going to be honest. I was a snob about online learning, you know, pre-lockdown. I just was like, oh, it's never going to be the same as in person. And then lockdown happened, and I had this whole schedule, like a tour basically in Europe of all these sold out workshops. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this. So I ended up, you know, taking a step back, and I put a 30-hour course together, and it was such an amazing experience. I'm so proud of it. I think that a lot of people have like written to me and said, no offense, but I've been to you in person and I prefer the online. I'm like, no offense taken, because I think I still have a way of delivering my humor and my personality um in a way where people can like take their time, they can rewind, they can rewatch things. It's very interactive. So there's a lot of homework, there's quizzes, and then also people engage with me on like regular live Q&As. So I get to meet people. And I do also like when people sign up, often do like a small group like intro. We meet each other and I talk them through the course so that people really feel like I'm there with them, you know, through the journey. And then I also get to like update the course. So like, you know, up until a few years ago, we mentioned arthritis. I was of the belief that arthritis was very much a mechanical thing. It was mechanical wear and tear. It was, you know, it was to do with joint destruction. And it's been beautiful because I've been able to like do a deep dive into that topic, and then I've been able to update the course and be honest with people. I keep the old information in and say, look, this is what I thought before. This is what I now think based on the research. So it's beautiful because people also get to see my journey as
Nice.
well. And yeah, it's been a really, really special thing. And also I'm able just to um, interact with more people because instead of people having to travel to see me in London or somewhere like that, you know, it's just so much more accessible, you know. So yeah, it's been a really beautiful experience. And then I now provide it for many yoga teacher training courses, which is really, really special because I feel like it's a really solid course and gives trainees like a really brilliant foundation. I know at the start of their journey, and I feel really grateful to be like a part of that. It's really lovely.
That's cool. So the original 30-hour course that you created is for anybody and everybody that wants, that's interested, can take it. And then what, you
Yeah.
created a separate program that is for the teacher training course, or do you
Basically
integrate?
they get like a bespoke version of that. It's really nice, you
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah.
the original one is lifetime access. And for teacher trainings, I'm able to offer it at a much, much reduced price, but then they get it for the duration of their training rather than lifetime, you know.
Yep. Yep.
So it works for me and it works really well for the people that are running training courses.
Cool.
And yeah, so it's just like a bespoke version of that with pretty much all the same information in it. And yeah, it's been like such a joy, you know?
Did you have to, I have not yet had the opportunity to take your course, so I apologize because I can't ask a question based
It's
off
not
of
good enough, Todd.
information. However, whenever interact with anatomy, online anatomy, slides are often used and or visuals are used. Did you need to create all of your own content, or were you able to utilize like stock footage to get your point across?
So in the manual, in the printed manuals or the, you know, the PDFs, I was lucky because I was able to take images from my books. So they're images that I've already
Ah,
with the publisher. So I was lucky at that. And then what I did was I actually hired a really brilliant 3D animator and we made 3D animations of all the muscles.
Whoa.
It's really cool. It's
That's a
really
big
cool.
endeavor. That's
It's
a
a
big
really, it was a big cost as
That's an
well.
investment. Yeah, that's a nerve. I mean, I would imagine you would have to think I better make sure I sell enough courses to make hiring a
Mhm.
3D animator work. Has that worked out for you?
Brilliant. So good. People love it. It's just because
Good.
we then we what happens is say let's say we're looking at the tibialis anterior that crosses along the shin across the front of the ankle. We will the session will be me talking about the muscle. I'll get you to feel it on your body and feel the muscle contract as the movements happen. We'll see it on the skeleton. You'll see it in the manual in front of you there. And but then you'll get a 3D video of it. So you'll get
Nice.
to in that way. So it kind of coming at it from all angles. So it really what depending on what kind of learner you are, like there'll be something that resonates with you there. So I've been very, very thoughtful because I really was like, I want this to be high quality. I want this to really work for people. I don't want to just make money and then people to feel like, oh, that
Yeah.
was okay. I want people to come away going, wow, like I've really got this. So I put a lot of time and energy and money into investing in the course, and it's just really,
That's
really
so
great.
cool,
So
Andrew.
so glad I did it all.
Congratulations. That's a big deal. I'm curious, 200-hour Yoga Alliance teacher training, to what level do you think one to what level of understanding of anatomy do you think someone should or could be at within, because 200 hours is not really that much time. Like a 200-hour yoga teacher training is not really, it's better than what I guess where we were before, where you could go do a weekend yoga teacher
Yeah.
training. I guess the idea is Yoga Alliance thought, let's create a board that
Yeah.
will create this sort of standard that will hopefully bring yoga professionalism to a place of, improvement. So I'm curious though, like, so you have a 200-hour group. What do you hope somebody will at least have in their toolbox of understanding in relation to anatomy at the end of that training?
Yeah, I just want them to have like a solid foundation. They don't have to remember all the names of everything. They just have to have some sort of confidence when it comes to how the body's moving, and knowing also that that's only the start of the journey, knowing that because also say we suddenly had 50 hours of anatomy, people would just get so overwhelmed because you're also doing the physiology and you're doing all the asana, the pranayama, like the physiology, all the stuff. It's just like, oh my God. So it's like a solid enough foundation, but then knowing that that's only the start, and that really you're going to start to teach, and then you're going to see the gaps in your knowledge, and you're going to have to go and seek out other trainings. Like I've just done so many trainings along the way over the last 15 years, so it's like, yeah, just recognizing that it's just getting people to a place where they can kind of competently teach a basic class, and then knowing that there's always going to be more training after that,
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
The lifelong study.
Yeah.
Oh man,
And that's one of
Andrew.
the beautiful things about it is we
Yeah,
can study
yeah,
all this forever. And it's
so
so
true.
beautiful.
It's incredible. I really appreciate your time, Andrew. Thank you so much for niching out a little bit of time to share your story with us. Is there anything that I missed or that you'd like to add?
No, that's it. Like
Good.
you're gonna share my website. I send out like a really
Absolutely.
lovely like weekly newsletter that's all anatomy and physiology related to yoga. Some brilliant content there. So come sign up for that. You
And
know,
that's on dr-yogi.com.
dr-yogi.com. I have my 30-hour training that we've talked about. I also do like shorter, in-depth live trainings on osteoporosis in yoga, arthritis, low back pain. So if you want like a kind of contemporary evidence-based view of these things, that's going to help you with yourself and your students, come join me for that and check out my books. You just come to my website, have a browse around. You'll see there's loads of stuff going on. There's loads of ways to interact with me. Yeah. I'm a regular on social media, put a lot of like really good informational posts out on that. So yeah, just come interact with me. And yeah, but it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Todd. It's
Thank you,
really
Andrew.
connecting with you. And I've got a feeling this is not going to be the end. I think we're gonna you know,
I
our paths
agree.
cross again for
I
sure.
agree. I want to take some of your courses and I'm really curious about what you've discovered in relation to low back pain. Also
Yeah.
fascinating. I like the idea that you're saying that when you come across new information and you want to update your course, that you leave the old course behind. You see with social media sometimes people delete all the comments they don't want their followers to see, because you're like, oh, that's gonna make me look bad, right? And I like the fact that you're saying, no, I want you to see
Yeah. Because
that
I'm
this is
proud
what
of
I
the journey.
thought and I learned and this is what I'm learning. And I think that's really important when
And
we
it's a lesson for everyone that we're just always in the moment doing the best that we can based on our current experience and the current information we have. But as long as you always have the desire to refine what you're doing, then that's all anyone can ever ask of you. I'm not sat here saying I'm an expert in everything to do with anatomy. So it's like, but I'm gonna do my due diligence to like update myself every so often and go, oh, this is a topic that I haven't looked into for a couple of years. So let's do a deep dive. Let's really look at everything that's out there about it and feel like on top of it. And then, you know what I mean? And then I move on to the next topic. So yeah, I love it. I'm so grateful
no,
to be
that's
able
cool.
to spend my time doing that. It's really special.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks again, Andrew. I look forward and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been so great. Thanks, Todd.